inside the off stump. Oh, he's caught it! I don't believe it! Tom Kohler-Cadmore has caught the most magnificent catch. At short third man, it's the end of Daniel Sams, and Somerset have won the Vitality Blast 2023. They've bowled Essex out for 131.
Hello there, you're listening to Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. This is the Somerset Cricket Podcast. Joining me, Ian Shepherd, for our Christmas special this year, we have Dan Kingdom, the official custodian of the Maidens Bowl by Somerset Men in Vitality Blast T20, lifelong Somerset fan exiled up in Cheshire, Steve Tancock, and the voice of cricket for another year, hopefully, if the BBC get that commentary contract renewed, Gibson. Gents, are we wintering well?
Gibbo, not too bad, thank you, Chips. Yep.
Good. Gibbo, what's the latest on this contract renewal then? Are we going to be hearing you for the foreseeable future?
I don't know. No news. I'm not sure whether no news is good news or no news is bad news, but I honestly don't expect anything to be sorted out until about March, shortly before the first game of the season on April the 4th. But
that is crossed. The way. It is generally the way things work, especially in cricket. I suppose probably with the BBC as well. So, probably the biggest story or agenda item we have to deal with is we have fixtures. So I think we've all had time to digest our men's and indeed women's fixtures for 2025. What do we make of them? I am not very happy about having 3 of our first 4 championship games being away from home. One of them being at the Oval.
Tough start again.
Yeah, very tough start. Yeah, cracking off with Worcester at home, and then we got Sussex away, Hampshire away, and Surrey away. And neither of those are going to be walks in the park, shall we say? Not that any games are easy in Division 1. But we got.
No, but we do need to, to use a cliche, hit the ground running, which we haven't done since God knows when, at the start of a county championship season. I mean, April was a miserable month anyway this year, but we weren't at our best except for periods during the game against Surrey at the Oval, which actually was one of the best games of the season as it turned out, along with the home game against Surrey as well. But they've got to be really on it right from the start if we're going to have any chance at all of being in contention for the county championship at the end of the season. But I thought, overall, it's the fixtures much as before. In all honesty, the last group is the same. The Metrobank One Day Cup, with not that much difference. And I thought with the county championship fixtures, this ridiculous business where you don't play everyone twice. So, there are 4 counties that you only play once. It could have been worse. I don't think it's particularly good from our point of view, but it could have been worse. So, no complaints really.
We don't play Surrey at home, do we? Is that right?
No, we don't, which is... Can I gauge opinion on this? Playing Surrey once, is that a good or a bad thing? My opinion is that it's a bad thing. And if you want to win the championship, you have to finish above Surrey. And if you want to finish above Surrey, you want to play them twice and not leave...
You want it to be in your hands. You want it to be in your hands getting above them. You don't want to have to rely on other teams too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Other people... I mean, if you were looking to avoid relegation... then only playing Surrey once is probably a good thing. But I think, if we're looking up the table, we should be a little bit pissed off that we're only playing them once and we're only playing them away as well.
Well, funny enough, if we finish second, if we'd beaten Hampshire in that last game, we probably would play Surrey twice, because I suspect they do make sure that the top 2 do play each other twice from the previous season. But we slipped to third, so we don't get that.
Are you saying there's some secret formula, Dan, that we don't know about?
I believe there is something. Yeah, they do make sure that the teams you don't play twice are sort of spread through the table based on the previous season. Yeah, it would never be the case that you don't play the top 4 twice.
Steve, what are your thoughts on the fixtures? Any catch your eye as when they came out?
Essex and Chelmsford, last game of the season. What a place that would be to win the title.
Oh, I tell you what, if we were all kipping in Don Topley's spare room, rolling on in at 3 o'clock in the morning, clutching a replica of the championship trophy, wouldn't that be something? I mean, they stole it from us at our place, so wouldn't it be nice to return the favour at the climax of our 150th season?
I don't think it's true that they stole it from us. The weather stole it.
No, they stole the points for being.
And in 2020, the rules stole it from us. You know, the ridiculous business about first innings leads. So, no, I mean it could be a fantastic climax to the season. But it's interesting the point that you make. It's a very bullish way of looking at it. That if we're going to win the championship, we need to beat Surrey twice. But
the flip side of that is we play Hampshire and Essex twice.
Yeah, quite. And we've been pretty poor against Hampshire recently.
Yeah,
but we've been pretty good against Essex. I think Essex regards Somerset as a bit of a bogey team. Just like Hampshire regards Somerset as a bogey team in the Blast, but less so in the Championship. Although that's just changed in the last 2 or 3 years.
Whenever we play Essex at Taunton, there's always a green steamer, isn't it, as well? Last year was over in 2 days. In 2022, it was over in 2 days and a bit. So hopefully we can greet them with that again.
Yeah, I hope we get result pitches at Taunton.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was quite a good piece with Nick Pepper on the website in the last couple of days. I was talking about all the technicalities of what they do at this time of the year, which goes over a lot of people's heads, mine included. But those pitches were getting better in the sense that they were more result orientated and they suited our attack better towards the end of the year. So I think, maybe the first couple of months of the season, Nick and his team were just getting to grips with that Taunton surface, working out what worked and what didn't. And then coming the end of the season, we got some, really, really good surfaces that produce some quite frankly fantastic cricket. So if we can do that from ball one on Friday, April the 4th next year, that could be something, because winning the championship is mainly about winning your home games. And of course, something we need to address is winning our away games as well, because we didn't win a single away game last year. All our wins came at home.
Yeah.
Which makes me a little bit more worried that 3 of our first 4 championship games are away from home, and we could be.
Well, I think the game at home is key, isn't it? The game at home is key because, on paper of those 3 home games, clearly the Sussex game is the most likely. It's the one we're most likely to win. So if we can win our first 2, home to Worcester and away to Sussex, then that potentially covers for the slightly more difficult games coming up. I mean, I know we don't want to slip up at all, but ideally we need to hit the ground running in those first 2 particularly, because they are on paper the slightly easier teams to play. Not that there are any easy matches, because then away to Hampshire, away to Surrey is tough. We
should have a full squad to choose from, though, because none of our lads are in the IPL. So, and of course, we don't know who the overseas are going to be yet, apart from Riley Meredith in the Blast.
Well, there's this rumour about us going in for Henry, and also that Yorkshire supposedly wants him, according to the Daily Mail the other day.
Right. Well, can I just say something? If Matt Henry ends up at Headingley, I just cannot imagine how that has been allowed to happen. Because all the noises
it's money.
Yeah, but it's like all the noise from all the members and all the social media. It is one. If you do this one job and get Matt Henry signed, that's fine. Whatever you do in terms of player recruitment, you don't have to worry about, as long as you get Matt Henry back at the county ground in some way, shape or form for 2024. And as regards to money, I thought Yorkshire were completely skint. I thought they were absolutely potless. So how can they be...
They sign overseas players, don't they? They always get a few overseas players in each season, so they've got... Yeah. They make it work.
But I mean,
what about Will O'Rourke? Has he been signed by anyone?
Don't think so, no. But yeah, he's definitely someone.
He would be an interesting alternative, wouldn't he?
we'll get them both. I mean, why not? I mean, Meredith's, not going to be here for the first.
We need an opening bat, Ships. We need an opening bat.
Archie Vaughan and Lewis Goldsworthy.
Archie Vaughan and Tom Lambie. I mean, I assume that we could get Renshaw if we wanted him.
Yeah, let's have Archie Vaughan and Matt Renshaw, left-hand, right-hand combination.
I did put a tweet out, didn't I? I put in
Leave Lammonby at 3. Leave Lammonby at 3. He had a really good season last year at 3. And we need a quick bowler and an opening batsman, or at the very least a top order batsman, serious batsman.
I think we need to. It's not the worst shout. He's not going to be in any T20 leagues, and he could potentially be a full season signing.
Yeah, someone like that. But serious top order batsman.
I think we need a domestic pace bowling signing as well, but there's just not any of them about.
At this point, it's pretty unlikely, I think. I mean, usually domestic signings are made sort of during the season and maybe just after. I mean, at this point, players have returned to their counties to training, haven't they? Anyone out of contract would have been sorted by now. So, but yeah, I agree. We probably did ideally need one. I think we got quite lucky with injuries last year, which potentially disguised the fact that we're losing Leonard and Baker, which on paper is fine as long as there aren't many injuries. But if we do get a couple of injuries, suddenly we're looking a bit short, aren't we? So yeah, we've got to be careful.
Yeah, and that reliable pace bowling core is getting older every year. So that propensity for the names that we would all be happy to see in the side being fit the whole way through is diminishing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how much Lewis Gregor will be able to bowl next season.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Absolutely managed that workload to perfection in September with Vaughan and Leach virtually bowling for most of the Durham game, most of the Surrey game, and then Lewis was able to come on and bowl against Hampshire when he needed to bowl long spells in there because he'd just been stood at slip for most of the previous 2 games. So, I mean, where are we sort of looking towards the end of this season? Chelmsford, you think, is probably going to be spin friendly at the end of September.
2 home games in September.
Hampshire and Yorkshire at home again. So potentially the same could happen, that Lewis could get the end of the season, not potentially need to bowl very much, and it could be spin dominated September.
Might depend on when the Kookaburra rounds are. I can't remember. I think they've confirmed they're going to be the 2.
They're the mid-season ones.
Yeah.
The 2 games in mid-season and then 2 later on.
I think, is it the 2 at the end of July and then the 2 at the start of September?
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
That's 3 home games. So if we can do a bit of cider about for those 3.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Go for it. And it's sensible that they're playing those Kookaburra rounds not in April, where the pitches are green and like puddings and everything just goes flat after about 5 minutes. They're playing them when the pitches, in theory, should be a bit harder.
Yeah, indeed. And we arguably got the best spin attack in the country with 2 international spinners, something that Somerset have never had before in their entire history, playing simultaneously, and Archie Vaughan.
I will draw your attention to September 2019, where we had 3.
Best hadn't made his England debut of that. Oh no, yes he had. Sorry,
yes he had.
Best, Leach and Roloff as well. So we had 3. And there was probably Trez didn't play in that game. He just came on and he did bowl spin anyway.
The reality is Bashir's not going to figure for Somerset much next season, is he? Is he going to be centrally contracted and what's the phrase, manage his workload?
I don't think he's going to feature much for Somerset for the foreseeable.
Not be available in. He'll probably be available in April and May, because obviously the current test is England's last test of the winter. So then England don't play again until the Zimbabwe test on the 22nd of May. So
we're not going
Bashir
to
should be
play two
available in April.
spinners in April, are we?
No.
I'm just saying Bashir will be available, not that he'll actually play. Obviously, this year Leach was injured, wasn't he, at the start of the season, so Bash did play. But yeah, it might be another case of loading him out again.
Especially if the dynamic is you've got an opening batsman who's a more than useful off-spin bowler, you're probably going to pick your slow left armour to balance the side, aren't you, rather than have another off-spinner. So,
absolutely.
In September, England don't play any tests, so we might have Bash for those. Play 3 spinners.
And it is interesting. I think I read somewhere that England like Bashir over Leach because they think Leach's best ball. Bashir's best ball is more of a wicket-taking ball than Leach's best ball. So you'll go for the theory is he'll go for a few, but he's more likely to bowl that magic ball that's going to get a quality test player out where the Leach doesn't.
Well, he hasn't bowled many magic balls for Somerset so far.
He certainly hasn't.
But I think he's much better suited by hard wickets where there's bounce and he can take advantage of his height. And that does him, give him an extra dimension as compared with Jack Leach. So,
and it's all about building for the Ashes, isn't it? So, and I think they want Bashir for the Ashes in Australia.
But if we look at it from a Somerset perspective, Leach time and time again gives us control. So if my perspective on it is if you need to rotate the quick bowlers and you want somebody in the first innings of a 4-day game to bowl a spell just to have control, I would rather see Leach at the moment because Bash might take a wicket with a magic ball, but equally he might end up with 8 overs and none for 50, and suddenly the opposition are away from you, and that very rarely happens with Leach. When it has happened, he's almost always clawed it back. So I think probably the way England want to play cricket is not necessarily suited to the way you play to win the championship.
I mean, Bashir, he bowls one bad ball and over. That's the trouble, and that gives the batting side an escape valve. Whereas Jack Leach, at his best, will just plug away over and over after over, hitting a length, making the batsman play. And as you say, Steve, just stopping up one end to allow the seamers to do their stuff at the other end. And when you've got slightly aging seam attack, as Somerset have, it's a very, very important role to play. And Leach is much, much better suited to it than Shoaib Bashir, with the best will in the world.
But then we might have at long last the maturing of a left arm quick to come into the equation. If we're looking optimistically, if we're looking on the bright side, then there's something there that might be a difference maker in the championship.
You talking about young Alfie Ogborn?
I am. Yeah.
I'd go along with that. I think I'd stick Alfie in the first game of the season, providing he's fit. Obviously, I think. Yeah, he's got something about him. You chat to him. He's so upbeat, so effervescent. You feel like he wants to take the world on. He just feels like he's like he's got it, whatever it is.
And that must be part of the thinking with the departures, mustn't it? That he's at the top of that pecking order now. Yeah,
without a doubt. Circling back then before we have a chat with Stephen Chalke about his new book. Do we think Matt Henry will be donning the dragon in April? Where are you putting your money? Yes, just a straight yes or no.
I don't think so.
I don't.
I think he will because he loves the club. He even came back to the club
last
year.
Right.
The old lads.
Yeah, 50-50. So I've got the casting vote, so Matt Henry will definitely be back. I tweeted the club admins that it'd be lovely to see an announcement coming out 7 a.m. Christmas morning. So fingers crossed the deal's done and they're just going to act on my suggestion.
Indeed.
I'm very pleased to say that we're joined by cricket writer Stephen Chalke today, who's going to be talking us through his new book, One Hell of a Life, which is a biography of legendary Somerset and, of course, Yorkshire and England cricketer Brian Close. Stephen, welcome along to Always Look on the Bright Side of Life.
Thank you.
I just wondered, Brian's not been with us now for sort of 10 years nearly. So what kind of prompted you to get cracking with this biography?
Well, I've been writing about cricket for nearly 30 years, interviewing cricketers of that era, and Brian Close is the person out of everybody in the first 30 years after the war who's fascinated me more than any other. It's a hell of a story, his whole career, and he's such a complex character who I think people haven't got underneath the skin of sufficiently in the past. And so, yeah, I've had this yen to write this book for a very, very long time. And earlier this year, I thought it's got to be done.
Fantastic. I mean, as we were talking about previously, myself and Dan weren't around for Closey's days at Taunton, but Stephen Gibbo, you very much were. I mean, my sort of memories are seeing clips of Closey wearing them on the body from that West Indies attack in, was it 76? And these
Old
legendary
Trafford
stories about
is the one that sticks to mind.
Yeah, standing at short leg without a helmet, which you'd never see in these days. I mean, what were your abiding, is that a word? Abiding memories, big memories of a big character taking the reins at Taunton?
For me, so I think he came in my second season of following Somerset. So I would have been 8, not going on 9 when Closey arrived. And immediately there was a buzz around the ground. There was a feeling that something was going to change and that he was going to make a difference. And he did immediately. And I think the phrase that springs to mind is he made us feel that we were capable of winning games. And he led from the front. I mean, for an 8-year-old, he was absolutely terrifying. When you sort of tried to get his autograph or waited outside the back of the old pavilion at Taunton and you saw him come out, he's one of those people who, he didn't just fill a room, he filled a ground to me. And whenever I watched, I was fascinated. You said about him fielding at short leg, but whatever he was doing, your attention was drawn to him. He was that magnetic character, and he inherited a team of probably still lovable, I'm not going to say losers, but lovable, not winners, maybe. And clearly that wasn't his way of doing things, and it was going to be his way or the highway. But he enlightened the whole of Taunton in that time he was there. And one of my dad, through his involvement with the football club, was very good friends with Dave Pipe, who the Pipe name, obviously in horse racing circles, you'll know, Sheps, is a legendary name, but Dave was a bookmaker in Taunton. So he knew Brian and they moved in horse racing circles together. And some of the stories that Dave Pipe would tell Dad and myself about Closey, like, famously wrecking his car on many occasions and driving to away games at 100 miles an hour in whatever he was doing. So it was a life, as Stephen says, a hell of a life, and it was lived to the full. And he galvanized us. And, when you think back to Botham and Marks and Roebuck and Brian Rose coming through and Peter Denning, he was making a Peter Denning in my mind, because he convinced Denning that he could play at that level, and he always had a lot of self-doubt in my mind. He just inspired, and it was, we didn't succeed massively during his time there, but if anyone laid the foundations for the glory years, then he's got to take a lot of the credit, because those players that came through in that era actually believed they could win. And Botham, if you don't know Brian Close, but you can remember Botham, think of Botham on steroids, and that was what Brian Close was like.
So, Stephen, I mean, sort of hearing stories about sort of Closey, is it fair to say that without Brian Close arriving at Taunton at the time he did, we probably wouldn't have seen the IT Botham that we saw over the years?
Oh, that's a big question. You can't answer that, can you? I mean, there were two of them, weren't there? There was Brian Close and Tom Cartwright. I've got some lovely quotes from Peter Roebuck in the book. I did an interview with him when I was doing my book with Tom Cartwright, and he talked about the input of the two of them into both of them. The one, the sort of master technician, craftsman, teaching him all the skills of bowling, and the other, this competitor who had this fierce drive to win and was never accept second best. And I thought the two of them brought out those qualities in Ian Botham, which were so staggeringly successful. And the input into Viv Richards as well, turning him from what was initially a rather laid back character into somebody fiercely competitive. I mean, Viv talks in one of his first books about Close giving him a rollicking about, not daydreaming, of really, you've got to be mentally strong in the game and concentrate. And I think of Brian Close really as an overseas cricketer for Somerset. I think he came down from Yorkshire. He was far older than any of them. He was from a completely different culture, and he injected something into Somerset cricket that had never been there before. And he wasn't the captain in the first year. He didn't particularly want to be captain. He'd had 8 years of it at Yorkshire and a lot of strife in the latter years. But it was obvious he had to be the captain. And after 1 year, Brian Langford stood down and he took over and did 6 years. And yes, I think he was a major part of the renaissance of Somerset. And it was sad that they didn't win a trophy. They came within one run of winning the Sunday League in 1976.
Oh my goodness, yeah, at Cardiff.
Yes. And it was the only, Graham Burgess said to me, it was the only time in his whole time at Somerset that he could remember Brian Close actually apologising and saying he got things wrong. And that day he listed 4 things he did wrong, and they lost by 1 run. And there was all that muddle about the scoreboard. Some of the spectators thought it was a tie and that Somerset had won the Sunday League because the score had been put up wrong for much of the game. So that's quite a story. Yes, he was a massive influence. But ultimately, of course, in 1970, the book starts in 1976, where Anthony's father is attending Somerset's home game against the West Indian tourists in May. And England...
Was that the one at Bath where...
No, not that one. That's later. That's when Brian Close is captain. I think that's possibly Joel Garner's first appearance when they beat the Australians against the West Indians in 76 at Taunton. And England are desperate to find some batsmen who can cope with the pace of Michael Holding, Wayne Daniel and Andy Roberts. And MCC have played against the West Indians at Lords, and all the best batsmen have been broken by the pace. Jeff Boycott's on his 3-year withdrawal from the England Test team, and Alan Gibson, Anthony's father's down at Taunton, where Brian Close hits 80 odd against the West Indians, and he pens this article in the Times saying, if we really want to beat the West Indians next week, you could do a lot worse than go back to Brian Close. And true enough, the next week he gets picked for England. Tony Gregg's choice. And Alan Gibson, who's such a wonderful writer, wrote this piece in the Times, and it's got this bit. I put it on the back of the book. I think this is the whole centre of the book. What the very Dickens and the devil of a cricketer Close ought to have been for England. The historians in the future will be puzzled about it all. Was it his own fault? Very possible, though others might also be to blame. Trevor Bailey said that he was the best teenage cricketer he ever saw when he saw him in 1949, until he saw Sachin Tendulkar 40 years later. And he played for England at 18, at the time the youngest player ever to play for England. He had the world at his feet, and just things kept going wrong for him all through his years. And he became England captain, and the most successful England captain of all time. Played 7, won 6, drawn 1, and managed to get himself sacked at the end of that. So it was a career with so many setbacks. But at the end, he became this quite magnificent figure who stood up to the fast bowling, at Old Trafford, he's remembered particularly when Michael Holding bowled, I think, 7 or 8 successive overs at him, all maidens, and he just stood there and tried not to flinch. 45 years old. So he played cricket for England at 18 and he played again at 45. And it was a career with so many might have beens. And some of them, as Alan Gibson implied, were his own fault.
He could be daft, couldn't he? Could be daft, Stephen.
Yes, well, the subtitle of the book, One Hell of a Life's the title of the book, Daring, Defiant and Daft. Well, the daring, he was always up for a challenge, whatever it was. And I got some lovely stories about crazy things he did, because he loved taking things on, sort of trying to do the unconventional, and he did it on the field and off. Defiant, he never admitted he was wrong. He was always right, and he could have saved his England captaincy probably if he'd just said sorry at the right time, but he couldn't bring himself to say sorry to the people who ran the game at Lord's. That just wasn't in his nature. And Daft, yes, he didn't look after himself, actually. He was surprisingly naive in a certain way. And there's a quality to him which is not quite what you expect, which is that in all the interviews I've ever done with fellow cricketers, they all said there was no malice in him. And, you know, you wouldn't say that about Fred Truman, and you probably wouldn't say it about Ray Illingworth. But Brian Close had this sort of childish innocence about him. He didn't hold grudges. He didn't see wrong in people. He trusted people too much. And so there's a lovable quality there in among, you know, this hard exterior. He's not really hard underneath. And I did a long interview with him on film once, and we had to stop for him to have a cry at one point.
Wow.
Tell us a story. Talking of daftness, tell us a story about the game. I think it was against Leicester, wasn't it? When Jim Parks couldn't carry on as wicket.
Well, he did a stint, I think, in 1963 at the Oval. He did a short a session keeping wicket for England. In 63 at the Oval, and the reports are he did quite well. He didn't make any mistakes. Anyway, this game, whatever year it was, 73, was it, something like that? Benson and Hedges Cup, was it quarter-final against Leicestershire? Of course, the irony is that Leicestershire by that time is captained by Ray Illingworth, and they're playing at Taunton, quite a big game, big crowd in. Somerset made 220 or something like that, and Leicestershire were 130 odd for 7. And Jim Parks took a little bit of blow on the thumb, and apparently Brian Close didn't try to persuade him to carry on. He just said, and Byron Rose kept wicket sometimes, but he immediately said, "I'll do it," and took the gloves. I've done it in a Test match, and then Alan Jones, Jonah, came on to bowl, and according to reports, he was a bit of a prat at times, and he wasn't Brian Close's favourite. And in Jonah's first over, Brian Close said, "These bloody gloves are too tight," and took them off and tried to keep wicking with no gloves on. And of course, the byes started accumulating. And then Tom Cartwright went up to him at one point and said, "Just get your head behind the ball and get your hands in front of your head. And he's, don't you tell me how to keep. I've done it in Test matches." And they lost by the ball went for 4 byes and they lost. And Peter Robinson said to me, it was like knocking a man down for 14 rounds and losing on the 15th. You know, they'd you know, that was the sort of daftness, really. And I think at Somerset, his success at Yorkshire, he had Ray Illingworth at his side, and Ray Illingworth was shrewd and he respected Ray Illingworth, and Ray Illingworth could pull him back onto the straight and narrow sometimes. He didn't quite, he had a bit of that with Tom Cartwright, but Tom Cartwright didn't play too many seasons before he got injured, and he didn't quite have somebody able to hold him back in the same way at Somerset. So there were daft moments, yes.
A postscript to that story, because it's another Alan Arthur Jones story, and it's another Leicestershire game. It's my dad and I were at Westland Sports in Yeovil.
Oh yes, I know this. This is in the
May
book.
1975.
Yes,
and we were actually up close and personal. And the short version of the story is Alan Jones bowled the last over, and Norman McVicker hit the last 2 balls for 6 to win the game for Leicestershire. And Jonah finished with, I looked it up on Cricket Archive, 8 overs for 54. which I thought that's probably not too shabby by modern standards. But then if you went over 35, you'd had a poor 8-over stint in the John Fair
Yes.
League. As the game finished, Close was incandescent. And he started towards Alan Jones to berate him. And my dad and I watched, partly amused and partly in horror, as Alan Jones, fearing, legged it, jumped over the boundary boards and locked himself in the mobile toilets the other side of the boundary as Closey pursued him off the pitch.
Wonderful. Well,
I saw it. Otherwise, I wouldn't believe the story. And to anyone who's listening and thinks,
well, I talked to Ray Illingworth about that game. He said he hung around for ages to say cheerio to Brian Close, and he didn't emerge from the dressing room. And he very rarely got the better of Ray Illingworth in Somerset Leicestershire matches.
They were our bogey side for years in the knockout cups, especially.
On a slightly more serious, serious note, I was interested, Stephen, in something that you wrote about the Yorkshire team of the 1960s and the fact that it wasn't a very united dressing room. There was quite a lot of tension, quite a lot of personality clashes. And either you as writer or Brian Close thought that was actually a contributory factor to Yorkshire's success, and that little bit of edge in the dressing room made them perform better on the field. And I just compare that. I've been thinking about Somerset's performance, particularly last season, but in recent seasons, where they're a very united, very happy dressing room. When it's come to the crunch, they haven't delivered. Whereas that Yorkshire side, for all the conflicts and personality clashes, when it came to the crunch, they did deliver.
Yes, Brian Close was of that. I mean, there are two schools of thought in Yorkshire. One is that the 50s team didn't win anything because they were always arguing with each other and there were difficult personalities. They didn't pull together as a team. And in the 60s, they had a better spirit, believe it or not, despite everything. And the other school of thought is that Surrey was such a great team in the 50s. Yorkshire finished fourth to Surrey 4 times, and Surrey was just the greatest team ever in that era. So, but Brian Close didn't. Yeah, Brian Close's view was that a bit of niggle in the team was a good thing, that as long as they came together and played, if they were competing with each other to take wickets and you had that hungriness in the team, it was a good thing. And I remember Maurice Hallam of Leicestershire saying to me once, they were always arguing with each other, but if you tried to argue with them, they were just one team, Yorkshire for Yorkshiremen, and they were united. So, yeah, I think there's some truth in what you say. It was certainly Brian Close's view that a bit of niggle was good.
Yeah. Anyway, I've vastly enjoyed the books. Wonderful. It's worthy of its subject, I think, and he deserved a proper biography. He hasn't, was a wonderful character in so many different ways, and I think you've done him justice splendidly.
Oh, thank you. Well, I saw his 2 children and they both gave it a seal of approval. I think his daughter came up with the best line in the book, actually. She said, he wasn't a good dad, but he was mine.
Very good. I mean, he certainly paints a picture of him as a larger than life character, Stephen. I mean, this may be an impossible question, but which current cricketer would you say is most like Closey, or is it just a case of he's a one-off and that we shall never see his like again?
Well, he is a one-off, but there are certain similarities with Ben Stokes, actually, in terms of how captaincy's matured him and he's drawn on his youthful immaturity to become an extremely good leader of men. I mean, Brian Close, Yorkshire were desperate not to appoint Brian Close captain. They thought he'd be a terrible captain. They thought he was unreliable, a maverick. The chairman at Yorkshire would have appointed anybody else if he could have avoided Brian Close. But he captaincy brought the best out of him. So there is a touch of that, I think, in the Ben Stokes' story. Although Ben Stokes is obviously a much more stable character than Brian Close was. I don't think he drives cars quite as Brian Close drove them, as you mentioned earlier. I've got a whole chapter on his driving.
Oh, absolutely fantastic, Stephen. It's been a real pleasure. The book is called One Hell of a Life. Brian Close, Daring, Defiant and Daft by Stephen Chalke. We can get it from Amazon. Anywhere else it's available?
Oh, you can walk in any shop and ask for it. I mean, all these shops have an arrangement they can get a book by the next day. It's widely available everywhere. And yes, you can get it from Amazon if you want to contribute to their funds. Yep.
Rather not if we don't have to. So, One Hell of a Life, magnificent biography of Brian Close is available now as a late Christmas present for the cricket fan in your life. Stephen, it's been fantastic having you on chatting. If you do have anything you want to pop on and have a chat about in the future, do pop me an email. We'd be glad to accommodate you, chatting all things cricket, as we like to do here on Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. But it's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Ian.
Cheers. Many thanks there to Stephen Chalke, who's Brian Close biography is available now. I did have a little look at that Lions game that James Rue and Casey Aldridge are playing. Interesting to see Rue Senior going in up top and keeping wicket as well. Now, he didn't do particularly well. I think he got about 15 and 8 or something like that. Do you think, whose idea do we think that was? Because it's probably something that we'd like to try, I think, because I've certainly said before that I feel like he's got all the attributes to be a naturally successful opening bat, but it's going to be difficult while he has the gloves. And it is it can be a pretty difficult task. I mean, Steve Davis has done it on occasion for us, but he's not really done it for a full season. So do we think, circling back to our little chat about opening the batting, in a couple of years, can we see Rue Senior at the top of the order and then young Thomas, who does look more like a stroke-making middle order player, coming in and taking the gloves? Or am I just getting ahead of myself?
I don't think we can rule it out. I think Rue's got the technique for it, and as always, it's the question of whether Rue can keep an open, but that might be solved by Thomas coming in and doing it instead. I mean, one more point to make is it might just be that England kind of winged it with picking that Lions squad, and they didn't really have any other openers. Because I'm just looking at that team that they played. There's not really anyone else who is an opener in the middle order. So it might just be that someone had to do it, and Rue put his hand up. So
Dan, you'd love to think with all the people they've got at the ECB and the selections and that, they get in the dressing room for practice and then the coach goes, oh, expletive, we only got one opening batsman here, hands up who wants to do it. I'd love, because that sounds the most club on a Sunday thing to do, doesn't it?
Sunday, third 11.
To be fair to them, that Lions tour only literally had that one match, and it was they said it was very much oriented towards like specialized high quality training rather than playing matches. So they probably didn't really think about picking a coherent squad, to be fair.
Is that the only match then?
Yeah. But I believe the Lions are touring somewhere else in the new year. I'm not sure where.
So I thought they were playing like a proper test match or test match in quotes against South Africa A. And that game was like it was a warm up against like a Cricket South Africa Invitation 11.
It was, and that's it. There's nothing else. But I think they've got something in the new year.
Well, it wasn't even a 11, was it? Was it 13 aside, something like that?
Oh, something like that. They're probably everybody got a game. Casey Aldridge was in there as well. I was having to think about Casey Aldridge. I think potentially the next Somerset player to get involved in the England setup will be Casey, because I think he is the most Bazball of all the players we've got on the books at the moment. And I think
I didn't say this. Sorry.
I think, if they can pick someone like Josh Hull, that was his name, wasn't it? The big left arm quick.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's no reason why they couldn't pick Casey, who is probably not quite as tall, maybe, but probably just as quick. And also all those attributes like they look for, like a Jacob Bethel or somebody like that. They just look at him and go, oh, or even with Bash, they just look at players and go, oh, we think we can make you succeed because you've got all the attributes, in you come, regardless of your county record, good or bad.
Yeah, I think you're right. it rather as with Bash, the potential and Bethel, the potential is there. If you're looking for potential, then Casey Aldridge has got it in abundance. What he hasn't done is convert that potential into match-winning results.
And when he was converting it, he then got rested early in last season, which still is one of the things that rankles most with me of last season.
Yeah, it was in the nominations for the brain fade of the year. Don't worry about that, Steve. Resting Casey for that Notts game at home. But then just circling back to that point, we say Casey could get in the England side based on attributes, or even any player could, not just Casey. Does it then, if players know that their performances at county level don't really count for anything, it's all about sort of attributes and approach and this sort of baseball way, are you potentially going to see players go out and bat like Umid did against Lancashire that time, knowing that if they're showing intent and averaging 15, but they're playing the baseball way, they've got more chance of getting in that England squad than being a quote unquote proper Rory Burns, Dom Sibley style opener who's grinding out difficult hundreds when the ball's nipping around everywhere?
I don't think so. I think because you've got to first of all earn your selection in your county side, and if you do that too often, you're not going to be picked in your county side. So
but Tom, thinking about Casey, if he could crank it up to regularly over 85 miles an hour, then he would definitely be in the reckoning. Because what England want are fast bowlers, not fast medium bowlers. They want bowlers who can bowl consistently 85, 90, low 90s miles an hour. But at the moment, I'm afraid Casey is well short of that sort of level. He needs to, and if he wants to get in the England setup, he's just got to run in and bowl really, really fast, because that is what will impress Andrew Strauss and Ben Stokes and McCullum. But and to that extent, then he could indeed cast caution to the winds in county cricket and just focus on bowling really, really fast, and that would impress the England selectors.
Was it Bryden Cast came back at a pretty? I know it was his first. Was it his first game back against us?
Yeah, it was
September. I think it might have been. Yeah, I mean he was talking about it. He bowled really well in the first couple of tests, and then he, miles better than a guy who I think he took 4 wickets at 110 or something in this season, and he was talking about the attributes that you need to succeed at test level are completely different than those that you need to succeed with at county level. Generally, your test pitches are fresh pitches that have been cultivated for the whole season. They've not had any cricket played on them. They are nurtured and loved to being these perfect, hard, fast strips that you're unlikely to see at county level. And you need a different skill set to get the best batters out. And not going to be generally troubled by sort of 80-mile-an-hour dobblies. You need to crank it up against them. So different skill set, I think, which is why I was sort of thinking, it's probably going to be Casey or Andy Umid opening the batting who are going to be the next Somerset cabs off the rank.
Well, why not Tom Kohler-Cadmore? I mean, he could get the innings.
Oh, he's going to sign for Germany, I've heard. Any more about that, or is that just something to fill up some column inches that
I think it's something for the future, potentially, depending on his England prospects and sort of when Germany have matches. I mean, it's sort of World T20 qualifiers are the kind of thing that he would play in, and I'm not sure when that is. So it depends on his. I suppose he'll just play it by ear, I suspect. Because although I suppose if he plays for Germany, he probably could immediately play for England if he was picked. I don't think there's necessarily a
only in cricket could you say that, couldn't you?
Yeah, there's lots of the rules are so confusing as well around.
I'm listening to this. I hear what you're saying, but because my mind goes back to all of these players, they need to consistently deliver it for Somerset.
Mm.
I don't particularly care if Casey Aldridge is regularly bagging fifers, or Andy Mead's getting glorious 50s, 70s, 80s, and we're winning games, or TKC is averaging 40 in the Championship. But my curmudgeonly old man self says until they start doing that, that's the time when they can start thinking about how they maybe push for England inclusion.
Yeah, but that's not how
we've
the
had
England selectors see it, is it?
no, it isn't. No, it isn't. But I still think from their point of view, they should be looking to deliver in the Championship for us first and then build on that. That's got, in pre-season, that's got to be your initial objective. If you go into the season saying, if I do this, this and that, I will be in the England selectors' mind, you'll end up like Marnus Labuschagne and be averaging 8 for the year or something, And there's a guy with more talent than you can shake a stick at.
But
I'd love to see TKC play for Germany. That'd be great. It's like Tom Kohler-Cadmore is missing finals day to play for Germany in their must-win game against Bermuda in Dusseldorf. That's Dusseldorf Cricket-Stadion.
That won't happen. He won't
Oh.
miss Somerset games to play for Germany.
Oh, I do hope not. We have some good news to share. For the third, I think it's the third year in a row, we have been shortlisted in the best cricket podcast at the Sports Podcast Awards. So give yourselves all a pat on the back, chaps. It's a team effort. And this year as well, we're in a new category. We're in the best team podcast as well. So we've got some interesting competition in that podcast. None other than Tom Curran's New England Patriots Talk podcast. And I've looked into this, and it is not that Tom Curran. It's a Tom Curran that used to play for the New England Patriots. But imagine that being named after Tom Curran, the worst bloke in the world. Imagine that. Oh dear.
Allegedly.
So I'm going to tweet out all the voting information. I might do a video when my legs are a bit better.
Your trouble, Sheps, is you're just a peasant. That's the trouble.
That's my trouble. Well, we all are. Us Devonians and all them Somersetians. Yeah, so as well as Tom Curran's Shithouse Patriots Talk podcast, we've got Widnes Rugby Chat, the Spurs Chat podcast. I just want to beat Tom Curran's podcast and beat the Spurs podcast. Yeah. That'll do me. In Season, a Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Fire and Ice podcast, which is the official podcast of the Coachella Valley Firebirds of the American Hockey League.
Oh.
They're probably saying exactly the same about always look on the bright side of life. Somerset fans get together once a week to chat about the team's ups and downs. Achtung, a Millwall podcast. I might vote for them because I keep me front windows. Miami Dolphins Talk.com daily podcast. I'm not sure we could go daily. I think that I do like talking about Somerset, but can you imagine this doing every day? Probably not. Wolves Express, the official Wolves news updates, the official Brighton and Hove Albion podcast, Potters Pod, the official Stoke City podcast. Rounding off the lineup, Call It What You Want, a CBS Sports Galazzo network. No idea what that is.
If you want to impress yourselves, Shep, I'd recommend you tune into Wolves, Brighton, or the New England Patriots tonight after you listen to this, because all three of those had pretty horrible weekends. So,
did they? Yeah. Oh, good. Well, at least Somerset didn't lose then.
Yeah. Well, we're unbeaten since the end of September.
Unlike Hampshire, they've lost 3 times, I think, since the end of September.
Oh, yeah. I think I saw a social media clip. Sonny Baker charging in for them.
Yeah, I think
there's a bit of cricket going on. Shit. Sorry, Gibbo. I know you've been dying for about the last hour to give us your in-depth report on the Abu Dhabi T10, which I knew you would have been glued to from ball 1 to the end of the final.
I did watch. I watched a bit of Tom Banton, who had a very, he had a very good competition. Got beaten in the final, though, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, TKC was top scorer, wasn't he? And TKC was top scorer. Banton was second.
Yeah, that's right. So
pretty good going.
I'm looking forward to seeing Tom Banton in the championship start of the season. I think it could be a real factor in Somerset's success this year. And TKC, if he gets his act together, and just gets a bit of focus and really tries hard to be, proper batsman, he could be a big factor as well.
Well, he's got to get in the side now, which is
but he has.
going to be difficult.
And the way he played towards the end of the season, he isn't going to get in the side.
I refer the honourable gentleman to my comments of 5 minutes ago.
Could you have EKC playing for England but not Somerset like Bash is? I don't know.
Can't rule it out.
It could happen. What else have we got? I think I'm pretty much done. I just want to say, I just had a quick brief idea there. They should make T10 an international format, but just have a laugh doing it. So you've got to draw the batting order out of a hat, all that sort of nonsense. Just T10, just make it like exhibition style for charity.
Too much
like
joke cricket already.
I know, but it would just be like they do with the Hong Kong sixes. Just do that. Do a T10 instead of those sixes. Right. Any other business, chaps? I think I've got covered everything on my list. There's not been much to talk about.
Can you just indulge me for 1 minute? I just wanted to say, as most of you know, I've not been as regular on the podcast this year as I'd like to have been. It has been a particularly difficult year for me and a member of my family. And I'd just like to thank the three of you, because when you talk about mental health and well-being, and either listening when I've not been able to do the podcast or joining you like tonight, when it isn't easy at the moment. And a special thanks to you, Gibbo, because you don't know how many times during the summer being able to listen to you has been a massive help. So Somerset will always be in my blood. It's always going to be one of the most important things in my life. But unfortunately, for most of 2024, for personal reasons, it's not been. And I hope and pray that next year that's not the case. But I wanted to say thank you publicly to the three of you for being there and supporting me and getting me through this. And I genuinely don't think I could have done it without you. So thank you.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so, Steve. And all the very best for next year. And let's hope it's a much better year for you and yours in 2025.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say, Steve, but yeah, looking forward to seeing you next year. I know you missed your sort of annual trip down to Taunton, but yeah, definitely hope we can see you next year more than once as well.
Absolutely.
Right, supper.
I was just saying, we haven't talked about Somerset women yet, who seem to be signing all the players. 3 internationals on the books.
It's good that we signed those 3, but let's remember they won't be available that much. Annoyingly, the international schedule does clash with most of Somerset women's games, unfortunately. So that's a bit of a shame. We'll probably see them a little bit in the women's blast, possibly a bit at the start of the season in the One Day Cup. It's good to have them, definitely, but we got to remember they won't be available too often. I think there's 1 slot left in the squad. I think they're doing like a trial day, aren't they, at some point?
I saw that. Yeah, I've gone through the social media posts, and I've got 17 in the squad. I've got Heather Knight, Charlie Dean, Sophie Love, Alex Griffiths, Danny Gibson, Fran Wilson, Lola Harris, Emily Monday, Erin Vukazic, who she must be good. Erin Vukazic.
She's an international.
But I'll tell you why, because if you get the cricketer, you get the schools pulled out. And I forget which school it is, but I think it might be Kings. Let's say it's Kings, for example. And they go through a Q&A with the head of cricket, and they ask, who is your best prospect? And he said, Erin Vukazic. And that was right next to a picture of Thomas Root, captain in the first 11. So she's got to be good if she is a better prospect than Thomas Root. Where are we up to then? So then we've got 9 so far. And then Molly Robbins, Rebecca Rogers, Chloe Skelton, Ellie Anderson, Katie Jones, Jess Hazel, Neve Holland, and Emma Corney. So that's his 17. So you reckon there's one more to go in that?
Yeah, so I believe the 3 England players are not technically included in the sort of, basically it's a 15-player squads funded by the ECB, I think. So we've got 14 plus the 3 England players. So we need one more to make up to 15, I believe. So yeah, we'll see at some point who that's going to be.
So glad we've got Dan, because I just rely on you to guide me through all of this. It's too much to keep up with at the moment.
Oh, I know, and I do feel a bit guilty. Well, not guilty, but well, a little bit guilty. But we're going to have to change it with the times. We're going to have to be. I was doing sort of the schedule for next year, and it is pretty brutal. When you're looking at getting the ground ready for men's and women's games, I don't know how the club are kind of looking at it in terms of sort of looking after the media and doing the live stream and all this, that, and the other. But it's effectively putting another 20 to 25 days. Cricket, is that about right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I reckon, I've not counted, but I reckon probably another 10 to 12 days cricket at least. So it's going to be.
Are they going to be playing some of the games? Are they going to be playing some of the games at Taunton Dean, though?
I don't think so.
There were 3
Jamie Cox
venues.
Jamie Cox said that primarily it'd be at the county ground, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I don't know if he said, did he say the county ground or did he say Taunton? Because he may have been including Taunton Vale in Taunton. Because there are 3 games all in the Women's One Day Cup which don't have a venue yet. So that could be Taunton Vale, or maybe it'll be Exmouth, maybe it'll be Bath. Who knows? Intrigued to see where they are. I'm also
intrigued. They could play at Bath. They could play on the Bath Cricket Club ground, couldn't they? As it's women's cricket, and that would be really good from the point of view of our exiled supporters in the north of the county.
Yeah, I hope they look at that sort of thing. Yeah, try and sort of spread it a bit. Although I think it'd be good to, rather than always farming the women out to other grounds, the men potentially could play 1 or 2 games.
They won't do it. It's all about the pounds and pence. I think.
Yeah. I'm just saying, in terms of the way it looks, if we're only having the women play at out grounds, it doesn't look great. It kind of needs to be the men and the women occasionally being out grounds in an ideal world. But I know it's difficult because obviously the men the men fill the ground, more likely to fill the ground than the women. But speaking of that, it's really intriguing. I'm really intrigued. There's a couple of single-header women's games during the Blast next year on Friday nights. Yes. There's no reason they can't fill the ground for that one. Maybe not fill the ground, but I think we should get much better attendances than what we have for the single-header Western Storm T20 games. They're Friday nights. They're prime time in June and July. Yeah, I just hope to see decent attendances at those games.
Well, we didn't really talk about that going back to us start talking about the fixtures, but our men's home T20 games aren't the best, are they? We've got Surrey on the Friday. And then, Surrey on the Friday, that double header. Then we're away for a little bit. Thursday against Middlesex.
There's a 5-week gap in terms of home men's Friday Blast games. After the first game, we then go 5 weeks until our next home men's Friday game. So, but in the middle of that, there's a home women's Lancashire game on a Friday at Taunton. So, hopefully, plenty of people go to that. Although it does clash with Gloucester, Somerset, at Bristol. So, people might be.
It's a bit annoying.
I've got to go, chaps. I've got to go have some tea. Have a very good Christmas.
You too, Gibbo. Enjoy your steak and chips.
Yeah, no, we've got pot roast beef tonight.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous.
That'll be all right. But anyway, let's look forward to a much better 2025 for all of us and for Somerset County Cricket.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas, Gibbo.
Cheers. Merry Christmas all.
Cheers,
Bye.
Anthony.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
Yeah, so mixed bag, as always, with the fixtures. Could have done better, I reckon.
A couple quick points about the fixtures is it's shame to see less weekends days in the championship this year or next year. I thought that would probably happen. This year we had 13 out of 15 rounds had weekend days. Next year it's 11 out of 15 because those 2 midsummer rounds are entirely over weekdays. The effectively the equivalent rounds last year were those 2 rounds at the end of August, which started on a Thursday. This year the 100s moved later and those 2 rounds have moved earlier. but they now start on Tuesdays, which is a shame because after the start of June, there's only 3 weekend days of championship, which is a bit annoying. But yeah, it is what it is. But it is good to see we have a game away at York in the One Day Cup. So looking forward to that. New ground for all of us, I think.
And of course, finals day is still incredibly distant from the Blast group stage. Some inexplicable reason, not sure why, but hey ho.
Yeah, it's just
which means
the way they built the schedule for some reason.
It means you then got that absolute logjam September, which bit us on the backside a little bit last year.
Yeah,
as we were all here, there, and everywhere throughout the country. Oh,
the One Day Cup final. The One Day Cup finals the men's One Day Cup finals on a Saturday this year rather than a Sunday, so it goes to reserve day. It'll still be a weekend, thankfully. Although it does mean the women get fucked over, they get to be the Sunday instead. So, and it means that also the way it's scheduled means that if Blast finals day goes to a reserve day, then anyone playing in that will have to go to a championship game the day after. So it's very crammed in September. And
oh god, what's our championship game the day after that? Because you just know it's going to happen, don't you?
Home to Hampshire. There might be a finals day as well. So
that's not too. You share the coach then, share the petrol money. Good stuff. Right, it's time to start the quiz. Only joking, no quiz this year. Knock that on the head. Anything else before we knock this on the head and I chop this podcast
good, thank you.
Get it all good. Fantastic. Right, Merry Christmas then. Merry Christmas, Somerset fans. Celebrate the birth of Marcus on Sunday with wine, women, and song, and we'll catch you all next year. Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Cheers, guys. Have a good.